Hello, everybody. Lieutenant Joe Pangaro here. I want to tell you we have a lot going on out in the world, as we can see. There's things to be concerned about for our future here in America and around the world. But we're also seeing that we're coming back together again. We're getting together as COVID-19 starts to slow down in many places. We're seeing mask mandates, even up in New York. They're taking the mask mandate off of everyone except 3 and 4-year-olds. And that will happen next month, apparently. But they're not asking for vaccine cards anymore, and it's slowing down. Although there is a new variant, apparently, that is much more easy to get than the Omicron, but it's even less dangerous, apparently. So who knows where we're going with any of this. But for right now, we know schools are coming back. It's almost the end of the year, and the kids are getting back into school. And we know that one of the articles I had written for Campus Safety was the return to school after COVID, and how I thought there'd be more danger, that kids that may have been on the periphery could have a little PTSD and be a concern. So I decided to reach out to Dr. Cindy Ryals. She is from St. Alphonsus School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And Dr. Cindy and I were on a previous episode, and she's a brilliant woman. She's written this awesome book. I want you to go look for it. Crisis Planning for Catholic School Leaders. Okay. So you can get a copy of that book. Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, and it's also sold through NCEA, which is the National Catholic.
Perfect. So I got her to give a plug for her book before we even started talking. So Dr. Ryals, welcome aboard. So give us a little bit of your background. Tell us who you are again. Remind everybody where you're a teacher, what you do, principal. What do you do?
A little of all of that, but for the last 13 years, I've been the principal here at St. Alphonsus. We are pre-K 3 through 8th grade school. Before that, previously, in my previous life, for 20 years, I was a 3rd grade teacher. Sometimes I miss my 3rd graders a lot, but I enjoy what I'm doing. And in 2014 was when I decided, or actually 2012, went back and got my doctorate, finished in 2014 with my dissertation. And I chose school safety as my topic because I knew, as a new principal coming in, I had a lot of experience in curriculum and hiring and all the other HR things that come with being the administrator. I knew all those things, but actually learning how to handle a different crisis and how everybody defined a crisis in a different way was what interested me in trying to figure out, how do I train all of these people at one time with different aspects of what a crisis would actually be. So
that's outstanding. And I know you're busy right now running your school to make sure everybody stays safe and secure. So the idea of writing the book, where did that come from? Why would you decide to write a book on school safety?
Well, it was actually being in the right place at the right time. I met the publisher of the book table at NCEA at a conference I was attending. And I let him know that the book that I tried to use in my dissertation on crisis planning had been written 15 years prior and was not eligible to be used in my dissertation work because it was just outdated. And so he invited me to send in my dissertation work, and one thing led to another. And I ended up writing the book using the help and knowledge that I had received in all my years to put my crisis plan together.
That's outstanding. And, it's interesting. You wrote this crisis planning for Catholic school leaders, but a school is a school. It doesn't matter where you are. I was just recently at a trade show in Atlantic City, and it was for summer camps. And there were literally hundreds and hundreds of camps from all over the United States came. And as I'm talking to them about safety and security, it's different. When I talk to school people, I talk to you, or I talk to somebody from another high school, a public school somewhere. I say, hey, school safety. Everyone seems to say, oh, yes, their eyes light up. Yeah, we're concerned about school safety. We think about it. We do drills. We do all that. When I spoke to the people in the camps, I'm going to say a full 60% of them were basically like, listen, we're outside, we're safe, we're a camp, we're a summer camp. And I said, don't you realize that the kids you have in your school are the exact same kids that are in school that are a concern, right? They're the same kids. Now they're just coming to you. You're just another school in the woods, you know? And about 40% of them, actually, we put a big sign above our booth that says, is your camp safe? And they'd walk by and they would look at, you know, some equipment that was there. And then they would stop short and look at that sign and go, I don't know. Is my school safe? Or is my camp safe? So the first thing I'd ask them is, have you had an assessment done? Have you had your camp assessed for safety? Right? And they say, well, no, what is it? They don't even know what that is. So we're still not catching up. But the fact that you wrote this book and you're up on top of it is great. What do you think is the first thing a school should do if they're worried about being safe and secure? They don't even know. What's the first thing they do? Besides get your book, what else?
Utilize every resource that you can. Do a site safety assessment, which we have several resources, law enforcement, dads, moms here. We have on the internet, you can find 1,000,001 different types of resources. Homeland Security has them. All the different school safety websites have site assessment tools that you can use. I put one in my book, but it's basically starting with getting a different set of eyes on your campus. And I will say, you know, you brought up a good point that we're coming back from COVID. And one of the things that I realized, because it's a work in progress, I have to practice what I preach. And one of the things we realized is that we're getting back to normal. Like you said, we're now having parents come back on campus, visitors are coming back to campus. And a couple of my teachers are brand new, have not been in a normal school year for the last 2 years that they've joined us. We've been in COVID protocols, or we've had no one on campus, and we've gotten very relaxed because we really haven't had anyone to keep our eyes out for other than ourselves. So now we're having all these different people come on campus, and it's testing us to see, are we ready? You know, do we know who's supposed to be there and who's not? And after school sports and leaving the gym doors open, and you know, we're finding all these things that we have to look at all over again. I thought, you know, here I am. I wrote a book. I should have the perfect safety plan in place, and it's constantly a work in progress.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I want everyone to hear that. It's not just because we're coming back from COVID. It's because we have to constantly remember safety and security. It's easy to kind of forget it because we kind of just stay relaxed. Everything's cool. Everything's good. No problem. But if we don't keep that security mindset, that's when we can get lax and complacent. So you're absolutely right. I have to say that there's a couple districts. I'm very happy to report a couple districts that I did big threat assessments for probably 3 or 4 years ago had called me and said, listen, we're getting back together again. We got some new board members. We got new teachers. We got new people. We don't want to do a full assessment. We just want to know if you want to take a look at the things we've done since you were here last. Maybe you can just give us, hey, is there anything new that came up in the last, any new standards or whatever? And I said, well, why are you thinking about that? And they said, well, because we're coming back and we haven't thought about security in a long time and we want to be safe. So the reason we did this in the first place was to be safe, and we don't want, just because time passed, to not be safe. So I was really happy about that. That was excellent. So now I have to plot them into my life now so I can make sure I can go check them out. But so you get a site assessment. That's what I always say. And I agree with you. That's the first thing to do, right? You have to know where your strengths and weaknesses are. Otherwise you're going to miss something. Or, you know, how about salesmen? Do they drive you crazy trying to sell you every product in the world? Do you find that?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now? I got a new microphone. Can you hear me now?
It's coming and going.
That's strange. And it is also saying that my internet signal is weak.
Okay, well, I hear you now.
Okay, good. All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It happens in this new world we're in.
That's right. That's right. And we do all of our assemblies virtual now, so I had to get a new microphone for my computer so everyone can hear me. we were talking about, remind me again of the question. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm saying now, besides the thing, do we see the salesmen? Do they try and sell you a
So,
lot of
yes,
equipment?
the gentleman stopped by to show me a new tool to prevent intruders from shooting through a door, that kind of thing. And I've seen so many of those, and they're out there, but it was basically an invention that hadn't been patented or wasn't out there and hadn't gone through all of the tests that it needed to go through. And so that's one of the things I also warn principals about, or anyone doing a crisis team, is that there's so many things out there, so many products out there. You have to be careful and use your money wisely in investment, because sometimes there's things you don't really need. And
Right.
then there are things that you're going to buy that may not be approved by the fire marshal, or, and I learned all that just from working with the SWAT team and watching them try to get through barriers and that kind of thing.
That's
No
that's
one is
interesting.
entertaining that.
Working with the SWAT team. When I became a director of school security, that's when I found out about every product that was out there. Now, I had gotten to my district. It was pretty big. I think it's 9 schools, transportation hub, administration building. There was lots and lots going on. And I got there and they said, "Oh, we just bought this visitor management system. It's fantastic. People put their license in and it could tell us if they're a sex offender. It tells us all this information about them." I said, "What'd you pay for then?" So we paid about $75,000 for it. And I said, "Really? Well, let me look into this thing." Well, first of all, the sex offender thing is useless because it's a name sound alike. It's not an actual police database. So you could be stopping a person coming in because his name is Bob Smith, and Bob Smith in Oklahoma is a sex offender, but not in New Jersey. Now you're going to embarrass this person. You're going to get all kinds of problems. So we turned that part off. By the time we got done going through that system with the 10 things the salesman sold them, we used 2 of them to get people in and out of the building safely. And what I found was when I start to talk to places, that's one of the things they always want when I do a presentation. They want to know, well, what about equipment? Tell us about equipment. What equipment is really good? Because the salesman, that's their job, to make it sound like the most important thing in the world. You have to have this. And like you said, some things you don't need. Some things are not perfected quite right. Fire marshals. As law enforcement guy, I loved my fire brothers and sisters. But I got to tell you, they drove us crazy. You can't put that on the door. You can't put this over here. You can't put a magnet in the door. Oh, my. So there's a battle going on there. And you have to be sure about that. So when I do a program, I make sure that I concentrate on equipment. I talk about equipment because that's one of the number one questions I get is, well, listen, how about this? Should we buy this? Should we buy that? And you really have to do your research and due diligence, or you can spend a lot of money you don't need to spend and miss out on spending on things you should spend it on. So I found that to be interesting. So they got to get the right equipment. They need an assessment. And the other thing you said was getting your staff trained. How do you go about getting your staff trained? When do you do it?
We do it at our faculty meetings and teacher in service. And I call it what if sessions. I like to give them scenarios, but I also like for them to what if to me. So I tell them, for this faculty meeting, we're going to talk about intruders. And these are, some scenarios. And I want you to think through it so that when we tabletop, you'll have a what if. And they do. They do an excellent job. Everything from what if a child is in the bathroom, what if a child knocks on the door? You go through every possible, what if there's a sub in a classroom? And that's a very tough situation. I do a training with my subs in the beginning of the year, but especially for COVID, we were basically begging for subs. I mean, if you'd been in town, Joe, we'd have had you subbing in a classroom. It was tough. So we had people who didn't normally sub for us, not trained with what to do in a drill, that kind of thing. So, it's a matter of keeping their anxiety level where they're not scared and walking around all the time. Because, everyone reacts differently to a crisis, and even training. Sometimes even just a what if will make someone who's anxious think through too much. So I try to be sensitive to that, but yet also realize we can't tiptoe around it. We have to talk about what's going to happen.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I have hit that many times when I go, people say it's so scary. And it is scary. Somebody coming in your building, going to shoot your teacher, shoot your students. That's a scary, scary thing to talk about. But the reality is it might happen. So you got to be ready. So it is hard. What I found is, and I actually took a word from the school district that I find is very important with the teaching people, is that what I said, when I get done providing this block of instruction to you, it is going to be scary, and it's going to empower you. Right. I took that word empower. It's going to empower you to survive. It's going to empower you to help the children to survive. So whether I scare you or not, when the bad man comes, it's going to be scary. So at least you'll have some information of what you can do, and that will help you. And what I find almost every time is when I'm done with the session, people say, wow, I never thought about that. And then I'll do a follow-up, and I'll find out from the principal, boy, we've been talking about it for weeks now, and people say they do feel a lot better having some ideas of what they can do. They're looking around their classroom where they could, block stuff up in front of the door. How could they get out? All that. So I love your what if sessions. I also find that a lot of places are now doing, when they do faculty meetings, that's like a 2-hour block of time that everyone has to be there. And they'll use that as, hey, we're going to talk about security, or talk about something new, or bring somebody in, or do some other kind of a thing. Very, very important. The substitutes, boy, when you say that, that was one thing. And here's a funny thing that I hit. I'm a union guy from the PBA, and I know the school teachers have unions. Everybody looks out for themselves, and they should do the right thing. But I went up and I said to a teacher, I said, listen, there's a substitute next door, so do me a favor, make sure you just let them know that if there is a lockdown, here's how we do it. Here's where we go. Here's where they lock the door, this, that, and the other thing. And every single one of them, of course I will. I didn't, I'll let her know. And then word got back to me through the principal that, listen, they want to know, are they going to get paid extra for telling these substitutes how to survive in an active shooter? Now they're instructing them. And I said, can we have a meeting, get everyone together? I said, listen, those children in that classroom are the same kids you're looking after, right? So don't you want that person? So it's not a matter, you're not responsible for what happens just because you told that teacher how we do a lockdown. But wouldn't it be better that we all know? Then there's a classroom next door. They could get through that classroom and get to you. It's, oh, yeah, I guess so. So I don't blame people for trying to protect their rights and all that kind of stuff. But we have to look out for everybody in that building, no matter what. And the substitutes, sometimes we created a program that we had, because we had the same group of substitutes that went to the whole district, no matter where they were. We had about 100 people. And I created a training program for them that they came in for an hour. We paid them for the hour to come in. We taught them everything we need to do. And then they signed off that they received the training, and it went in their file. So that when a new person came, no, I never received the training. Boom, they got the training first thing, went in their file. Now they know they're trained. We knew they were trained, and it helped. But during this pandemic, you're right. We brought lots of people into lots of organizations that were willing to come in, and we didn't know who they were half the time. It was dicey. So I'm hoping we're past that now as we move forward. So if we're going to get an assessment, we're going to train our staff, we're going to get the right equipment, and then we're going to keep up on a mindset, right? A security mindset that empowers people and doesn't scare them. Those are the basic things, don't you think, to help your school, be in that right way of thinking about things, to be prepared.
Saying this out loud, I'd like to get your opinion on this as well, because I train, and when we're talking about substitutes, about not having codes, use real talk, use plain talk. Because when you do have a parent volunteer running papers off in the lounge and they hear, code blue, pink, and yellow, they're not going to know what that means. And so even though plain talk can be a little bit more anxiety causing in some, I don't know, but when I'm in some place and I hear a code, I know something's up, kind of, raises my anxiety level, and I feel like they need to know. And so we have stopped using codes as much as possible. I preach that. I don't know what your opinion is on that, but I just feel like that's another thing I see in crisis manuals I evaluate, that they'll have codes for 20 different things.
Right. Well, let me tell you exactly how I feel about that. Get rid of them. Right. The person that's in your school shooting is probably a student, and they know all about what you do. They know you lock down. Their goal is to hurt as many as they can, as quick as they can. So get locked down. What are we going to forget when there's a crisis? Code orange. Does that mean there's a shooter in the building, or does that mean we climb out to the playground? Does that mean the plumber is here, or is there a gas leak? People will forget everything in that crisis moment. You want them to have the right information. Lockdown, intruder in the building. There's no mistake what's going on then and there. And people are going to move, and they're going to move quick. But we have to practice that in advance, because that fear factor that people will get, there's fight, flight, or freeze. Those are the real things that human beings do. They fight, they flight, or they freeze. And what I say all the time is, you do not want the first time you have to react to something to be the first time you thought about it, because you're going to freeze. So preparing everyone ahead of time, this is why we use these words. It sounds scary, but if we say lockdown, intruder in the building, you know something's going on, move quick. There's no questioning that. We evacuate the building, code purple, why are you still in the building? Well, I thought code purple was shelter in place. I don't remember. So that's the way I see it. Clear talk is the best thing. I guess there was a thinking that if there was a bad guy in the building and they weren't actually shooting, they were just being out of control, and it might be dangerous. And you said code orange would give you a head start to lock the building down. But that's not how those things work. All right, that's not how it works. The shooter usually announces themselves by trying to shoot through the door or getting in and shooting right away. We got to move quick. So clear talk, I think, is absolutely the best.
Thank you. I'm glad that.
Yep, and you're right on the ball. You're an author. Come on, you're a doctor. This is fantastic. I told my wife I'm going next for my doctorate, and I said, you'll call me Dr. Joe. Then she says, if you think I'm calling you doctor, you got to be kidding me. One of the things that I wanted to touch on real quick, is there anything particular that you think the parochial schools, Catholic schools, that they have to consider? Is there anything different you think from your school than from a public school that would be different?
Yes and no. What I've seen the biggest difference is our schools, we work on a budget, and each principal has their own budget, whereas in the public system, they tend to have so much money allotted to each school, and they kind of know that ahead of time. My budget kind of goes from year to year to year, and I have to determine how much am I going to put into my, safety protocols and a fence or monitoring system. Each school is different. And so some of our schools that are, smaller in numbers, smaller budget, older buildings, they're not going to have what they need to outfit their schools. And so I try to help them be creative, finding grants and different ways. I think the public schools have a little bit more of an advantage. A lot of them already have SROs that's in place. So it really is a lot about budgeting and what can you afford. But I preach all the time, it doesn't matter what your budget is. You can still.
There's a lot you can do.
There's a lot
you can do. You can make your own window covers. You can put the tape on the ceiling so your safety corners. You can pre-lock the doors and use a little cheap magnet or anything to keep that door from having to be done in the outside. Now, it's interesting. In New Jersey, the legislature here, the Northeast is really up on this. They spend a lot of money on it. They realize that our parochial schools, our private schools, were kind of left out of the funding. And those kids are citizens also of the state. So they created an alternate funding pool for the private schools, the Catholic schools, the Jewish schools, all the religious schools, that they would apply for it each year through the public school district that they're in. That they would say, hey, we're in Monmouth County and we're our Catholic school. They would go to that high school in the town that they're in, put in for it, that the town would go and do the assessment and say, yeah, they don't have cameras, they don't have this and that, and here's what they need, and send it into the state, and the state would fund it as a way to, close that security gap, because, we have the money, I guess, available, whether we do or not, they find it. And it was a good thing to do. So every year there's a rush through the private schools to get into the regular schools and say, hey, come over and do this before the date gets by so we can get the money. But other than that, I could see my kids went to Catholic school, and there was a cake bake or a fundraiser or something for everything that took place. And I would imagine that they're doing that for security in some places too. You know, we need some new cameras. Can we get a donation, or can we sell more cupcakes or something? But you do what you got to do. So, Cindy, if there's people out there listening that are in parochial schools, private schools, what's something that you would say to them as far as taking this serious, like they do?
I think one of the number one things I hear when I speak to principals in any school, but especially a private school, is they're afraid that training and bringing crisis planning to the forefront might indicate that they have a problem. And I try to explain to them just the opposite. Parents want to know that when they drop their kids off at your doorstep in the morning, that you are doing everything in your power to keep them safe. And I don't think any parent would argue with that. And so I've seen a change in mindset over the years. And unfortunately, it took something like Sandy Hook and other situations to change that mindset. But when I first started doing this, I found that people would shut me down because if we talk about crisis planning, then that means I have a problem. And that's not the case.
You're right. And you're absolutely right. I've heard that myself. If we start talking about this stuff, people will think that we're not safe. You know, that's why we have to do all of this. And it's not true. So what I do, I tried to find a way around that, because I do some consulting for a couple of private schools, religious schools. And what I do is I've done an assessment for them, and then I give them a certificate and a letter that says, this is a safe school. You have done everything you possibly can to make this the safest possible environment. And they show that to parents. When the parents come, they're like, look, we were considered a safe school. We had an assessment done and we're doing everything. And the parents love it. Even we did a testimonial with one of the big camps we did. And I asked that question, you know, because the camps really think that if they think we're running around about security, their kids aren't safe. It says, no, these parents come in and want to know, is my kid safe here? You know, oh, absolutely. We've had an assessment. We treat it like school. So you're 100% correct. Everyone has to be aware of it. I think parents I want to know if my kid's going somewhere, if they're safe there. My son's off to college and I want to know how safe they are. What do they do there? You know? So Cindy, I want to thank you very much again for being on. Again, we could talk forever. Everybody, if you want to go out and take a look, it's Crisis Planning for Catholic School Leaders, and you can get it from Amazon or also the NCEA, which is the National Catholic Education Association. By Dr. Cindy Ryals, Ryals. I suggest you go get that book. Take a good look at your schools. Make sure you're safe. If you're not safe, ask your local police. If they can't help you, reach out to me, get a copy of Cindy's book, and then take it by the horns, as they say, and get your place safe. Cindy, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.